When fans first watched Wizards on Deck with Hannah Montana, most didn't notice anything strange. The jokes landed, the sets were colorful, and the crossover felt like a celebration of Disney Channel's golden era. But years later, when people revisited the episode with adult eyes, something became impossible to ignore. Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez never share a single scene. Not a conversation, not a reaction shot, not even a blurry background moment. And in television, especially crossover television, that's a deliberate choice. Disney built this event as a ratings juggernaut. The entire point was to put its biggest stars in the same space and let fan excitement do the rest. So the fact that the two most talked about Disney girls of the era were kept completely separate tells us everything we need to know. Visually, the episode works overtime to maintain distance. The cruise ship setting gives the illusion of closeness while allowing constant separation. Multiple decks, hallways, performance spaces, cabins, all of it creates plausible excuses for characters to miss each other. The ship becomes a maze where paths almost cross, but never quite do. That almost is key. There are moments where logic says they should be together. Group scenes where one is conveniently absent. Ensemble chaos where the camera cuts just before an interaction would naturally happen. It's subtle enough that younger viewers wouldn't question it, but intentional enough that production teams clearly planned around it. And then there's tone. Miley's storyline leans heavily into public spectacle. Her character is constantly surrounded by noise, fans, expectations, performances, interruptions. The camera stays wide, emphasizing how watched she is. The chaos around her mirrors Miley's real-life position at the time. Disney's most visible star under constant scrutiny. Selena's storyline, by contrast, is more controlled and contained. Alex Russo operates in smaller spaces. Her humor is sarcastic, defensive, and self-aware. The camera lingers on her reactions rather than the crowd around her. It's quieter, more internal. Two different energies, two different visual languages, placed in the same episode but never allowed to overlap. And once you factor in the off-screen context, the symbolism becomes almost too on the nose. Both girls had dated Nick Jonas at different points during their Disney years. Miley's relationship came first. Selena's followed not long after. On paper, it was innocent teenage dating. In reality, it was emotional overlap happening in the most public environment imaginable. Years later, people close to the production described the situation as awkward, emotional, and very high school. And that phrase matters because that's exactly how Disney treats the situation visually. Avoidance. Instead of confrontation, they created distance. Instead of addressing tension, they staged around it. Instead of forcing a moment that could feel uncomfortable or fake, they let silence do the work. And silence in storytelling is powerful. The cruise ship itself starts to feel symbolic the longer you think about it. Everyone is technically traveling together, yet emotionally isolated. Relationships move in parallel lines rather than intersecting. It's a floating world where proximity doesn't guarantee connection, which mirrors how fame works for young stars. You're surrounded by people yet deeply alone. Everyone's watching, yet no one really sees what's going on underneath. What makes this even more fascinating is Disney's reputation for leaning into drama when it benefits them. Rivalries sold magazines. Love triangles fueled fan engagement, but here the network chose restraint. That tells us the situation wasn't something they wanted magnified. Instead, they turned real-life tension into a logistical puzzle, something to manage rather than exploit. And that choice likely protected everyone involved, because at the end of the day, these weren't seasoned celebrities with media training and emotional distance. They were teenagers navigating first relationships, first heartbreaks, and first public scrutiny, all while playing characters meant to entertain millions. When fans later discovered the behind-the-scenes reasoning, the episode took on an entirely new meaning. What once felt like a fun crossover suddenly read like a carefully choreographed compromise. Not a feud, not a rivalry. Just two young women who didn't need to be forced into proximity for the sake of entertainment. And in many ways, that quiet distance ended up being the healthiest possible outcome. Today, Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez exist in a very different place. Not just in their careers, but in how they approach relationships, fame, and each other. Both have looked back on their Disney years with a level of honesty that only comes after surviving it. Miley has spoken openly about how overwhelming it was to grow up under constant scrutiny, how every choice she made felt like a headline, and how little room there was to process emotions privately. She's described her teenage relationships not as scandals, but as formative experiences that happened far too publicly. Looking back, she's acknowledged that she was reacting, not rebelling, trying to understand herself in an environment that didn't allow mistakes. Selena, meanwhile, has reflected on that same era with a different but equally raw lens. She's talked about feeling emotionally overwhelmed, people-pleasing, and internalizing pressure rather than acting it out. Where Miley pushed outward, Selena turned inward. And both responses make perfect sense when you realize they were growing up in the same system, just coping differently. What's striking now is how similar their conclusions sound. Both women have emphasized the importance of boundaries. Both have acknowledged how damaging it can be to have personal relationships dissected by strangers. And both have made it clear that not every chapter of their lives needs to be shared, explained, or justified. That shift matters. Because when fans ask, are Miley and Selena friends now? The honest answer is probably more mature than people expect. They don't appear to be close in the traditional sense. They aren't photographed together regularly, they don't collaborate publicly. But there's also no animosity, no tension, no lingering narrative of rivalry, and that in itself is growth.